Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the morning show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, August 31st, 2020, last day of August. So preparing for the beginning of September. And I guess that makes next weekend Labor Day weekend, after which America might maybe possibly care about the election and what sort of government, what form of government it might have going forward forever. Just, small events that might be impacting some of our lives. Much to catch up on over the weekend. No chance of really getting it all, which is by design. Not only Donald Trump's design to create a torrent of outrage such that no one will ever be able to completely keep up with it, at least not inside of one person's brain. You might need the collaboration, which, well, good. We've got at least two brains to dump on the air today, not to mention, of course, the Hive super brain that all of you who are listening live and via podcast comprise. So that's our best shot at trying to keep up with all of this, and of course our best shot at trying to get rid of all of this as well. Let's see, so many things we could spend an entire show on and that would deserve it, and then so many things that could fill a normal 2-hour show with a variety of subjects as well. Where do you want to start? I don't know. We'll give Greg Dworkin a chance at organizing his thoughts as well. Let's see. Over the weekend, more violence around protests, especially in the Pacific Northwest. Messages from Republicans running for re-election, including the execrable Steve Scalise, who made the news twice with outrageous advertising and claims over the weekend. Let's see. Telling everybody, of course, that entire American cities are burning to the ground under Antifa and Black Lives Matter protests, which, of course, you live in an American city, most likely. If you're listening to the show, there are a couple of friends among our overseas and audience abroad. But you must know by now that American cities are not burning to the ground, despite the claim of the second ranking Republican in the House running ads insisting that entire American cities are burning to the ground. Of course, there are entire American cities disappearing from the map in the figurative sense, I guess, or the transitive, I suppose, transitive property explains some of this. Our coronavirus death toll now above the entire population of Shreveport, Louisiana, which presumably Steve Scalise cares something about. I don't know, maybe not in his district, but maybe it is. But he's these American representatives are supposed to care about what happens in their state, generally speaking, and have some solidarity with the people there. But that's all broken down these days. We no longer have that going on. Of course, he also made the news, Scalise did, over the weekend by releasing, or what did he do? He retweeted a video or created a video. I'll have to track down the story. Borrowing, let's say, stealing, the voice, the artificial computer-generated voice that Adi Barkan, who I hope I've pronounced his name actually correctly, the well-known and courageous healthcare advocate suffering unfortunately from ALS, who's basically made it his life's work to fight for preserving American healthcare and expanding American healthcare and access to it for everyone, of course, while he essentially fights his, eventually, we have to be honest about it, losing battle against ALS, and who's now unable to speak on his own and uses a computer-generated voice, and was, of course, figured prominently in the Democratic National Convention via video there. And I guess Scalise has opted to take and manipulate this video, and because it's a computer-generated voice, can generate additional text that he never actually spoke in his video or anywhere else, and make it seem as though he was calling for the abolition of police, and that he was, instead of advocating for his one main passion, though he has many, I am certain, of expanding access to health care, that he was in fact advocating an entirely different message. And what the hell, why not just go ahead and do that? Because eventually we know we'll be caught, and we know we'll be called out and shamed for it, and then we'll pretend to have some shame and maybe delete the video, but the message will have gotten out there, and that's essentially how they intend to approach the election. And true to form, Scalise did execute that plan. So we've got that going on. We've got, continued nonsense, of course, on all levels, from the president, the guy who calls himself president, and new stories to cover in the background, too. For instance, finding out that the Justice Department's efforts at unraveling the mysteries of the 2016 election and the intrigue there, we now have new reason to believe that Rod Rosenstein, apparently playing all sides of the fence here, waved off the FBI from conducting its own counterintelligence investigation of Trump's financial ties to Russia, which posed a fairly significant counterintelligence question and risk, with word that, or indications to the FBI and their counterintelligence team that the Mueller investigation, which he had allegedly fought for to preserve against Trump's baser instinct at attempting to fire Mueller, but that the Mueller investigation would cover that angle, and then essentially, I guess, indicated to the Mueller investigation that nothing had changed over at FBI counterterrorism, and that there was no reason for them to, at the Mueller team, to veer into unraveling the Trump-Russia financial connections, because surely the good folks at counterintelligence over at the FBI would be taking care of it, thus ensuring that no one was taking care of it, and that we somehow arrived at the issuance of the Mueller report with no one having, as they say, followed the money. You've perhaps heard that that's an important strategy, and many people recommend it in terms of getting to the bottom of almost everything, but in particular, a money-centric scandal like Donald Trump's life, essentially, would fairly demand it in order to be anything close to comprehensive in terms of the view of his possible conflicts of interest. And Rosenstein was successful in getting people waved off from both sides. So that seems fairly interesting. We'll probably have to spend some time delving into that. In the huge international coup news, there is word that Jared Kushner got himself a seat somehow, along with the ambassador to Israel, which makes some sense, on the very first direct flight from Israel to UAE, except nobody really actually cares about that. When we talked about this, when the so-called peace deal was announced, I mean, I guess it's a peace deal. I don't really know why we have to call it a so-called peace deal, except that Jared Kushner has had such a huge hand in it. Maybe it's wise. Just I'm hedging against the possibility that it's actually a secret war deal, which, who knows? You know, I've taught you all how to read a Trumpster comment, and if a Trumpster says there's a peace deal between Israel and UAE, it might be a war deal. We never know. But he did fly there. Some pictures released, of course, maskless in the cabin of this commercial airliner, and we just wonder when everybody's going to be coming down with it. Israel is something of a hotspot. The whole Middle East continues to be something of a hotspot for the virus, which I guess is not surprising to virus watchers who remember Middle Eastern respiratory system, MERS, and maybe they just love respiratory ailments in the Middle East. It could just be a thing for them. All right, I've got one right now. So I might as well hand over the mic, at least briefly, to Greg Dworkin. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. Take a sip of something.
Cough. Yeah, right.
The story in the New York Times is really complicated. And Andrew Weissman, who was involved in that as one of the prosecutors, says the New York Times story today is wrong. Alleged secret DOJ order prohibiting a counterintelligence investigation by Mueller, quote, without telling the Bureau. In fact, he says FBI agents were embedded in the special counsel's office, and we were never told to keep anything from them. What's unclear is whether they went and then told the FBI. Also erroneous is New York Times claim of Rosenstein concluded the FBI lacks sufficient reason to conduct an investigation into the president's links to a foreign adversary, and then there's a special counsel order that he cites that says, no, we did. But it's just really complicated. I'm not sure if he's just covering his own butt. Marty Letterman says there's something weird going on here. The full story hasn't yet emerged with everything. Mueller wrote the FBI agents in his shop were supposed to send counterintelligence info to the Bureau, but according to New York Times, at least some of the FBI appear to have thought Mueller was handling it himself. So it's somewhat inexplicable how and why the counterintelligence investigation could have somehow fallen through the cracks. One possible clue, New York Times says, the investigation McCabe opened against Trump a few days before Mueller's appointment was separate from the broader inquiry, and then McCabe was walled off by Rosenstein. So why didn't McCabe do something? The Times suggests McCabe thought Strzok was handling it with Mueller. Maybe McCabe was wrong to think so, but even if it's right, is it really possible nobody noticed that the Trump investigation was moribund? It's really strange, very strange, and the full story is yet to emerge. And I think that's right. Okay.
This would have been, though, I think central to what most people who thought things were being investigated and
things are being handled, right? So we'll just put our faith in them because they're handling it.
Right. And then I thought it's like a cartoon. I thought you were handling. I thought you were handling the Spider-Man thing, Spider-Man
to me,
name.
I'm not a lawyer, so I'm no expert here, but just sitting back in the bleachers, it just seems to me that none of this is really going to get settled until Biden's president and these guys are out.
I guess not.
You're not going to know what really went on with Bill Barr still there.
We also may never know, even if Biden is president. But on the whole, I would rather take if I can't know, I'd like to switch presidents, please.
Yeah, that's fair. So let's step back and recap since I left you on Thursday or Wednesday or whenever it was.
Someday.
Wednesday. You were traveling on Thursday, right? So
yes.
We didn't even have a Thursday show. So on Wednesday, we were still about to get day 3 and what turned out to be day 4, the next day of the Republican National Convention. And how did that go? It was kind of a snooze fest. And again, I think the best way to look at the Republican National Convention is what they wanted to do is make little sound bites to put on Facebook, or Fakebook as people call it. Some people say it's Fakebook.
I believe them.
The whole reason that the whole GOP convention didn't hang together and seem like a whole is because WHOLE, it was a whole HOLE, is because it really wasn't. It wasn't meant to be coherent. It was meant to be a little of this, a little of that. You had one speech saying this, you had another speech saying that. They didn't follow each other. There was no theme. It didn't matter. That's not what they were looking for. They wanted all these little sound bites that they could send out to the ether, whereas the Democrats had a Zoom meeting for 4 days that everybody participated in and sort of got comfortable with. And when you step back and look in the polling, the Democrats did fine. They had a minimal bounce, but what happened is ABC poll, Trump's favorability and perceptions of COVID response stagnate post-convention, whereas Biden's favorabilities went up. So essentially, the Democrats did what they wanted to, which is to say, okay, you guys keep telling us it's not enough to vote against Trump. You have to vote for Biden. Here are reasons to vote for Biden. And Democrats largely said, yeah, okay, good. I'm good with that.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I sent you a couple of funny pictures my kids keep sending me. One of them is a Bernie 2020 sign.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And the appropriate letters are duct taped out with Biden's letters written in Sharpie. Yes. So it's a Bernie 2020 sign. You could still see Bernie2020.com at the bottom, but it just says Biden.
Yeah, the B and the E are preserved.
Yeah, and everything else is duct tape. And then there's another one that Rachel Bidecoffer sent around, which I think is kind of in the same vein there. Mm-hmm. It's a pickup truck, good old boy pickup truck.
Wow.
Native Texan, and stuff on the back of the cab window. But on the very back of the pickup truck, right in the middle, it says Black Lives Matter, and then the license plate says Go Vote. This is from Mississippi. Okay. And on the left of that are 3 bumper stickers still preserved. Top one says McCain, the next one says McCain, and the third one says Romney.
Yes.
On the other side, the next one is Gary Johnson, and then the last one says, fine, Biden, but this is bullshit.
Okay.
And that's pretty funny, too. And that
some evolution.
Just summarize things.
This is an all-American guy, it looks like, from his stickers.
Yeah, exactly. Or as Dave Weigel says, back on August 7th, 2019, Joe Biden tweeted, "The words of a president matter. They can move markets. They can send our brave men and women to war. They can bring peace. And they can unleash the deepest, darkest forces in this nation like Donald Trump has chosen to do." That was back in August of 2019. You may remember Biden was also tweeting back in January about how you have to take this pandemic seriously. Yes. So Weigel tweets that and adds, "Biden could always bungle it. But if you covered the primary, you saw him pursue the theme, the president has stoked violence and racial tension, that he's carrying into the fall. And weirdly, he's both on Trump's turf and in his wheelhouse." And so with Biden going, I guess, to Pennsylvania today, it was finally decided. Everybody was talking over the weekend, should he go to Kenosha? Should he go here? Should he go there? When it comes to campaigns, there's more armchair quarterbacks for campaigns than there are for the New York Jets. And, everybody has an idea of what you should do and what you should have done. Everybody likes telling Pelosi what she should do.
Sure.
Everybody likes telling Biden what he should do. Everybody knows what Trump should do, but, he doesn't listen to anybody. And by the way, neither do any of the other people. So they're going to do what they think, is going to be best for the campaign. And that's not a justification. I'm just saying, they've decided to go to Pennsylvania partly because Tony Evers, the governor in Wisconsin, said, don't come. In fact, he's begging Trump not to come tomorrow. They're busy. Yeah. It's like when you have a natural disaster and you have to drop everything to get the presidential security and all that stuff. Yes. It kind of distracts from what you're trying to do. So it's not always a good idea to go right away. Biden is heeding that because he's a, practical grown-up. And Trump is going for the photo op. And he'll talk to the police, the law enforcement people in Kenosha, because those are his supporters, including some of the most racist ones, and get a soundbite out of it. And that's basically going to change nothing. But it'll be there, and Biden will do what he does, and, we'll see what happens. As far as the post-convention wisdom is, so far, we don't have enough polling to really know, but what we do know, and what we have back so far, is that nothing has really changed. So, again, this ABC poll, Trump's favorability and perceptions stagnate. President Trump's effort to build his appeal and define his opponent at the Republican National Convention, which is abbreviated RNC, just like Republican National Committee, which is annoying when you're switching between convention and non-convention, but the RNC for now. Using pageantry and the White House as the backdrop, which, by the way, got everybody annoyed, has little apparent impact on the electorate's impressions of both him and former Vice President Joe Biden, a new ABC News Ipsos poll finds. Trump's week of celebration did not improve his favorability, even among his own base, and the country still remains widely critical of his handling of the major crisis of his presidency, COVID-19. So that, in a nutshell, is what's going on here. Coronavirus is the big thing. Schools are reopening. There's exploding cases of coronavirus on just about every college campus in the country right now. Sorry about that. You got a college-age kid. But that's what's happening. And less than 1/3 of the country has a favorable view of the president in the days after he accepted the Republican nomination for the second time. That's 31% has a favorable view of Trump. His favorability rating stood at 32 in the last poll, taken a week earlier, right after the Democratic convention. I don't know what it was prior to that, but if your favorability is 32, you're not on your way to re-election. And then Trump finds himself in a much different position than his chief rival. And don't forget, Trump is the incumbent, so it's magnified. In the new survey, which was conducted using Ipsos Knowledge Panel, so it's a panel poll, Biden's favorability remains higher than his unfavorability, 46-40, solidifying his improvement in favorability from last week, when attitudes about the Democratic nominee improved to a net positive from a slightly underwater position prior to the convention. His favorability ticked up from 40 to 45 just after the convention, and among Democrats, favorability climbed 7 points after his convention, showing signs he solidified support among his base. That's where the Biden duct tape sign comes in.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
So at the GOP's gathering, the president sought to frame his response to the virus before a mostly mask-free audience. And I think, and this is really worthy of discussion. All my conservative friends during the 2 or 3 days prior to Trump's speech, at which point when they saw Trump's speech, they said, this is really boring. But prior to that, it was, oh, my God, you don't understand. You don't realize the power of propaganda. And I'm looking at this and feeling totally unmoved by it and say, okay, well, I'll take your word for it. Obviously, you're susceptible to it. You don't know how many people are out there. Well, okay, but I'm looking at the convention numbers and not that many people are watching. How dare you say nobody's watching? Well, I'm looking at the numbers. Nobody's watching. That's what, that's what the Nielsen is saying.
Yes.
Okay, and they're
Nielsen.
just not watching. And so, and I do watch, and I'm not moved, but I take your word for it. Conservatives will be moved by this, but I suspect those that do are already voting for him.
Yes.
And all they see is like tons of flags, and that's going to move people. And I'm looking and seeing a crowd of old white guys. Looks like the Villages. Everybody's partying, and nobody's wearing a mask.
Yeah.
The Villages in Florida, the retirement community.
Right.
Where they use golf cars.
Golf car parade.
Cars.
Yes.
Golf cars, as they're called. But I think that if you are worrying about your kid going to school, and you got a kid going to school, it's got to be in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
And you're watching these old white guys party like there's no virus, and you have to worry about these restrictions, and they get to, be like 5 feet away shouting at each other,
right,
with no masks. Then that's not going to go over well. And that's the visual you're going to remember, not the damn flags.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, I guess unless you're just totally sold.
If you're totally, well, then, your vote was never going to change anyway. But if you're looking at this as Scott Adams, the nutcase that writes Dilbert, says, as a master persuader, that's the visual people are going to remember. And that ain't going to work for him.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the clock's ticking is all I can tell you. What do we say? It was. I'll just remind everybody it was 40 days for Herman Cain. So if that's any guide,
well, we got more to say about Herman Cain too.
He's got more to say.
Well,
amazing.
His Twitter account still has a lot to say about it.
Isn't that really just him?
Or as somebody put it on Twitter, irony is undead.
Right. Why not?
But we'll get to Herman Cain's Twitter account in a moment.
We'll
so
see.
Not that many people were watching. And as far as the other crisis facing the nation, which is racial justice, Republicans sought to frame the debate over Black Lives Matter and the protests in the context of law and order. That's impossible when you're the president and there's no law and order.
You would think.
Most Americans, 62%, view the incident with Blake, which has left them paralyzed from the waist down, as a sign of broader problems in the treatment of African Americans by police. But that number is not as stark as the 74% who said the same in the wake of the killing of Floyd. There's a decline across ideological and racial groups, but most sharply among Republicans and white Americans in terms of sympathy for Black Lives Matter. But there's still sympathy. And because it's returning to where it was before, after a spike, that doesn't mean you can look at it the way that people feel about the gun laws. There's a general perception of support, which may or may not be intense depending upon what's going on. But the lack of intensity is mostly among Republicans. And the last 2 weeks of the general election set it up between an incumbent ticket facing a favorability deficit, while views of the Democratic ticket have bounced into positive territory. So that's where things stand. And you can't look at that and say, oh, well, the Republican convention was a great success, because it didn't accomplish what it needed to. It didn't sway anybody outside the base, and his base is too small to live with, to win
well,
with.
Really.
To live with, too, based on how things are going. So, again, step back and look at broader pictures. Let's see some of the polls that we do have so far. New to the playing field for this year is the USC Dorns Life tracker polls, and now we have a daily tracker to look at.
Okay.
On August 17th, before all this started, Biden was at 51 and Trump was at 41, so that was a 10-point lead. And today, this morning, as of August 30th, it's a 7-day sample, so 3 days of it are after the RNC finished. It was a 10-point lead. Now it's Biden 53 and Trump 41, 40 and a half. So it's basically a 12-point lead.
That's larger.
So a net of 2 from 10 to 12 over the course of the 2 weeks with more time to come. Now, because there's a couple of more days, and we're not seeing it in the poll yet, but if there were a slight bounce for Trump, it would just bring us back to 10 where it was. And if there is no slight bounce for Trump, then as of now, for example, Biden's walking away with a slight gain over the last 2 weeks. So, for the conventions don't really matter people like me, it's like, hey, look at this. The convention didn't really matter.
Yeah, a little bit, I guess, but within the noise realm.
Within noise.
I suppose. Okay. Still,
But wait, we have more.
Oh, okay.
So this is Dave Wasserman. There was a poll last night of Charlie Crist's district in Florida.
Okay.
Florida 13.
That guy. I remember.
Okay. Charlie Crist, 55% plus 16 over Anna Paulina Luna, 39.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, so he's winning in his district. Great.
Okay.
But
yes,
they also polled Biden, and Biden's 54-40. He's plus 14 in a district that Clinton carried by 3.
Okay, that's bigger too.
Wasserman thinks it's a bellwether. So we'll get back to that after the break.
All right. Well, I mean, that's as good a place as any to pick your bellwethers. I'll tend to agree, and that would be a fantastic result in Florida. And Charlie can come back too. What the hell? Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. We are back with Rick Dworkin, just describing your very clever plans to bring everybody all these fun illustrations that you were sharing with us earlier. And
well, they're good ones, So let's get back to the St. Pete poll. It was taken August 29th, 30th, so it was over the weekend. It was after the RNC was finished, was concluded.
Give it back when you're done.
And the fact that this bellwether in Florida has Biden up 14 when it was a +3 Clinton state is a big deal. Wasserman further writes, Dave Wasserman, if Biden is really up 14% in Florida 13, which compromises the majority of Pinellas County, he might be up 10% in Pinellas as a whole, which is one of the oldest large counties in the country, and that would be a very good result for him. Now, it's the general area that David Jolly used to be congressman in.
All right.
That's the old Florida CD 13, says David Jolly. It was newly redistricted for the 16 race, but story is significant nonetheless. If this district sees a 10-point swing from 2016 numbers, it's hard to see any pathway for Trump in Florida, says David Jolly, who knows Florida.
Yeah, well, knew it. He's still pretty in touch, I'm sure.
Yep, so I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah.
And, of course, there's always more.
I would take that.
But here's a reminder from Steve Shale, speaking of Florida, the Florida guru.
Okay.
Who points out ballots in North Carolina are mailed out in 4 days. For those of you who say, well, I just wish the election were here already, it is here.
Okay. If you're in North Carolina.
Right. With North Carolina's August 31st update, says Michael McDonald, voters have requested 535,000 mail ballots, and registered Democrats have a 200,000 advantage over Republicans. Used to be that, like last year and the year before, and the year before that, and the year before that, Democrats and Republicans would equal each other approximately, and perhaps even be outnumbered by non-disclosure, the independents, what do they call NPAs, nonpartisan affiliate or non-party affiliate.
Yeah, right.
And so the Democrats and Republicans would match and then be a hefty NPA component as well. This year, it's Democrats 53, Republicans 15, and no party affiliation 31. Now, that could be shifting from the day of election, whereby, you're just the Republicans are going to continue to vote on Election Day, and the Democrats are going to shift from Election Day to vote by mail. And just because you send out a vote by mail doesn't mean it gets back. That is to say, these are requests, not votes. So you shouldn't overread this. But I will say, if Democrats didn't have this kind of lead, they'd be in trouble. So North Carolina is still going to be a very close state, but these are all encouraging numbers for what's going on with the Democrats.
All right.
Also, the House Majority PAC adds $11 million, says Ali Mutnick, to fall TV reservations, zeroing in on some offensive targets in the Midwest. For those of you who have found the Midwest full of offensive targets, here you are. Notable news buys. $1 million in Cincinnati for Ohio 1. This is the House Majority PAC, so we're talking about House seats. $1 million in Indianapolis for Indianapolis 5. And $1.3 million in St. Louis for Missouri 2. Or Illinois 13, because I guess it's a similar market. So the House is putting money in, and the Democrats seem to be in a reasonably strong position in the House. They seem to be in an improving position in the Senate. One of the articles that caught my eye this morning is somebody who's very concerned and troubled in Maine. Oh,
I know someone who's like that.
Yeah? Who do you think it is?
I think it's Bill. No.
Well, you know who this is?
Yes.
Her name is Jane Calderwood.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
and
agree
she
with
used
you
to be, for like 20 years, Senator Olympia Snow's chief of staff.
Oh. Well. What does Olympia Snow have to say?
I don't know what Olympia Snow has to say,
damn, okay.
but this lady says, I can't support Susan Collins.
Yeah, she would be a big deal, I imagine, in Maine.
She's proven unwilling to stand up to the president and too enamored of political power to speak up for the good people of Maine. I'm tired of hearing about how concerned she is. These times demand strength and action, and she's shown neither. I put up with a lot of grief in Washington because I work for a moderate Republican, and I swore for decades I wouldn't be driven out of the party, but the election of Donald Trump as a Republican was the last straw. Trump chose the Republican Party because it was an open slot, not because he possessed any strong belief in the party and its policy goals. So reluctantly, I changed my party registration, not because I wanted to leave my party, because the GOP left me. And it turns out Susan Collins leaves her troubled and concerned.
Well,
so
why
she
not
can't
borrow
support
the
him.
phrase? Yeah. Well, those two used to be. I don't know. What was that? I don't know if they were personal friends or not. They were
a pair.
Yeah, I mean,
Snow was clearly the leader. Collins was the follower, but Snow is the more senior person.
Yeah.
She also was a better senator, but that's another story.
Right. That too. Okay. Well, I'll take it. In a smallish state like Maine,
everything matters, particularly in a close race.
Yeah, and they'll know who she is. Someone who's a longtime chief of staff for somebody who's been that big in politics in a small state, you might not think, I know my senator's chief of staff's name, but in a place like that, Vermont and Maine and those sorts of states, New England states, really, and the small ones that's true. That happens. That people really do know. Oh yeah, I heard she said she wasn't voting for him. Okay, it's a big deal.
Right. So Anthony Zurcher, reporter. BBC senior North American reporter, was commenting on the poll from ABC that finds little change in Trump's favorability rating since the convention, with 31% having favorable impression, Biden's favorability 46%. Again, Biden's superpower is decency and compassion. Harris shares it, and Trump doesn't have it, and people understand that, however they vote. But Zurcher writes, this race has remained very stable pretty much since Biden locked up the nomination. It seems like it'll take something major to alter the political inertia.
Major. Very major. Strongly
major.
Yes.
ABC hasn't released the head-to-head numbers yet, but when it does, I'd be surprised to see any significant shift given these favorability ratings. And again, we expect a slew of polls this week, says Harry Anton. So we have that. We have Harry Anton saying Biden has a larger lead of any challenger at this point against an elected incumbent since, well, ever. And this includes Perot questions from 92. Part of that is an unpopular incumbent, but it's plausible Biden's a better candidate than many here give him credit for. Again, going back to Weigel's point. Okay. Joe Lockhart, who is a former Clinton guy.
Yes,
I think there's an assumption voiced by Kellyanne polls that more violence helps Donald Trump. I think we need to check our assumptions. This is 1968, and people see what Trump is doing, and maybe that's why he has a 31% approval rating, especially with Biden saying, it's your fault, dude. But the other side of it, don't forget, is in 1968, the incumbent party lost.
Well, that's true, too.
Because they're responsible.
Yeah.
And Nate Cohn is looking at all of this and saying, since we're bored waiting for our computers to run some more code, let's just suppose for a moment that Trump does get a bounce. And it's exactly as the Morning Consult depicts. You got Biden +6 by the end of next week. Let's say that that's where it winds up. Leaving aside the context of a bounce, because don't forget it's called a bounce because it goes up and then down. But let's say it's at Biden +6. That's a tough number for analysts. Biden's still the favorite, but it's getting into the zone where it doesn't take that much of a polling error with that much of an electoral college edge for Trump to get a close race, which is not the same thing as being ahead. In the context of a bounce, Biden +6 isn't a great number for Trump. After all, bounces are usually bounces. Looking back, incumbent presidents would usually be expected to fare worse than their standing post-convention. Post-convention is their high point, and then they go down. -6 is not exactly where you want your upside to be. Anyway, it's all an exercise. Who knows what the post-convention polls will look like in a week? And even then, we'll have to wait until the middle of September to decide, is his advice. But what Harry Anton says, well, what I see right now is Ipsos favor, the ABC Ipsos poll favorables indicating no movement, the YouGov panel indicating 2.5 movement to Trump, Morning Consult indicating 4 points toward Trump, the USC Dorn's Life one, the only one that's a tracker, but that's the one partially post-convention, shows no movement at all. Not exactly screaming big bounce.
No, I guess not. Okay.
So that's basically where we stand
Trump
on all
looks
of
like
this.
Bounce. Yeah.
But, there's one more poll, which I thought I should mention here, but it's a slightly different poll. It's from Stat News, a stunning Stat Harris poll. A huge bipartisan majority of Americans sees coronavirus vaccine approval process as being driven by politics and would worry about the safety of a fast-tracked vaccine. Remember, that's going to be Trump's October surprise. Right? 78% of Americans worry the COVID-19 vaccine approval is being driven more by politics than science.
Yeah.
That's especially important because this morning, there's a story in the Washington Post, new Trump pandemic advisor pushes controversial herd immunity strategy worrying public health officials.
Yeah, great.
Again, part of the whole theme for the Republican National Convention is that the pandemic's over. You don't have to worry about it. We handled it great and just suck it up and open everything up.
Yeah. And that's, I guess, the strategy of the new advisor as well, he's not an epidemiologist or anything.
No, he's a radiologist. He doesn't know crap about this.
All right. I mean, I guess
he's
they're just
there
counting
because he tells Trump what he wants to hear.
He's a real doctor. It's
right.
Just,
he's from Stanford's conservative Hoover Institution.
So I guess that's what the deal is.
Doctor says, he's telling what he wants to hear. Deborah Birx should have resigned a long time ago. This is a perfect thing to resign over.
Yeah.
I'm figuring a lot of these folks are still hanging on because they're still doing the vaccine fight. Because they don't want to ruin the vaccine for American perception. Because they'll think it's politics, if in fact we actually need a vaccine. But pretending that the whole thing is over isn't an exaggeration. That's what they were doing at the RNC, and that's what they're doing now.
Sure. There's no doubt about that.
I don't think it's going to work. Coronavirus rates are rising fast among children, says the New York Times. All you have to do is open your local paper. My local paper every day is, here's what's going on with the schools.
Yeah.
And so this is not news that they can manipulate. And, you know, it's in the news all the time. So it's vying with the Kenosha and Portland stories right now. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that those are going to remain. The coronavirus is going to remain, and that's the one that's going to be much, much, much more in local news unless you're living in Wisconsin.
Yes, I would guess so.
Or Oregon.
Right. Well, I did notice that the Republicans also had a field day, several days over the weekend, tweeting about a supposed reconfiguration of CDC's standards about who did and didn't die from coronavirus or just nearby coronavirus.
Yeah, again, more politics. You know, only something like 6% of people died purely of coronavirus. The other 94% died of a coronavirus plus comorbid condition. Now, normally epidemiologists would step back and say, okay, this is a good way to define what the risk factors are. Mm-hmm. And Republicans are saying, oh, only 6% of people died from coronavirus, therefore everything's exaggerated and only about 3 people died. Trump was right when he said it was going to be 15 and then faded. Okay. As if these folks are dead. That's why we look at excess deaths.
Yeah.
I mean, it's completely wrong, but it goes along with the, coronavirus is going to go away because of herd immunity, and besides, it was not a big deal in the first place. Mm. So they can sell their base with whatever they want to sell their base with. It doesn't mean the rest of us are buying Trump stakes. I just don't think it's going to work.
Yeah. I'm not certain.
It's the biggest advocate of this way of thinking. Here's a story from Huffington Post. Okay. Zombie Herman Cain tweets the coronavirus not as deadly as media said.
See? I knew it. He's not dead at all.
The former presidential candidate died of the virus, but his family continues to tweet conspiracy theories from his account.
I have a theory. There's a conspiracy going on.
He is not undead.
I guess. Yeah, I mean, that's just. I guess that's also a good indicator. I mean, it doesn't tell us anything normal about anybody, but
it tells us everything. It tells us their entire attitude about this.
I mean, I guess it tells us, okay, how crazy will they get, and what sorts of things will they do, and is there a bottom? No, he's dead, and they're using his account to say, it's not deadly. I mean, it killed me, but the rest of you. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. And plus, of course, I mean, they've been on about the comorbidities for quite a long time now, and insisting that that was their thing. Oh, well, he may have died with coronavirus.
It's nonsense. It's complete crap.
I mean, those people had comorbidities, but in order to have a comorbidity, generally speaking, have you ever decided that if somebody's dead now, they don't have that comorbidity anymore, right? They're just dead. Right. So people who have comorbidities. I've been
living for 25 years with it. And I'm 64
that's
years
the thing. I was alive with it.
Right. And I was alive until I got coronavirus. Therefore, coronavirus didn't kill me because I died of my thing that I've had for years and years and years.
Right. I mean, I was intending to die of that, but I never got around to it.
Pull that crap and get away with it.
Dead is dead.
The only people you can fool are reporters.
I guess, who say, well, they did report that. CDC did
editors.
say it. Yeah. I don't know. So I know that's too complex for most people who are just feeding on headlines to get, but that struck me as pretty odd. Like, all right, well, I had this comorbidity for 25 years, and then this other one showed up, and who knows what the real reason is? But as soon as that one came, I died. It was I took pills for my heart for 20 years, and I was doing fine. I was going to die eventually, I guess. All right. Well, I thought that was really
psoriasis, and then I got this virus, and I was in the hospital for 2 weeks on oxygen, feeling miserable, feeling like I was suffocating. Then I died. Must have been the psoriasis.
Yes. Well, you don't know about the heartbreak of psoriasis. That's the reason they call it that.
Exactly.
Heartbreak. So, that is. I don't know why they call it psoriasis.
There you have it. So that's really what's going on, folks. It's going to be a lot of churn, as we like to call it.
Okay.
Churn means choppy waters, but ultimately, the bays, the ocean's the ocean. Doesn't really change all that much.
Yeah. Even the boat parades. Don't forget the beautiful boaters.
Don't forget
not counting them.
So boat parades don't vote.
Right.
Oh, speaking of yard signs, one of our favorite topics over the years.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of Biden people saying there's a lot of Trump signs in my area and there are not that many Biden signs.
Yes.
But that's because people keep stealing the Biden signs.
Well, yeah, that's one of the things about it. But yeah, I think maybe this year. I mean, I did see that. As a matter of fact, there's a top diary, trending diary over at Daily Kos about exactly that situation that this person had driven through. Here it is. Where's the title? After driving 237 miles through rural Georgia, I'm ready for the giant meteor to arrive. And I guess it's about having to endure enormous stretches where there are only Trump signs. And yeah, they don't vote and all that. But you don't want people to come back from anything thinking, hey, the country's doomed because of what I saw. And it's one of those dumb optics stories, I guess.
If I saw signs like that at a hipster coffee shop in Brooklyn, I might be a little bit.
Yes, right. I mean, it doesn't change anything. And really, when you went driving through 237 miles of rural Georgia, you knew kind of what you were likely to see. And it's accurate. It's true. There's enormous swaths where that's the case. But yeah, I mean, then you don't want people arriving wherever they're going to demoralized about an important race. And but on the other hand, if you passed out hundreds of thousands of Biden signs, you know how many there would be in that 237 miles of rural Georgia? Still zero. So,
other side of the coin, though, is look and see who's raising money, and that would be the Biden campaign. And at the same time, you got to remember where you are. For example, if you happen to have a nice chat with our friend Joan McCarter.
I might try that tomorrow.
Ask what's going on in Idaho. Yeah. And will that tell you what's really going on across the country?
Right.
I suspect a lot of people in Idaho kind of like Trump.
Yeah.
But a few like Biden. So what does that mean?
Right.
I don't know. That's why we have to wait for the polls.
Miles. Yeah. Well, okay. I mean, so
otherwise you're ruled by anecdotes, and anecdotes don't really tell you what's going on. It's not data, as they like to say.
No, unless you get enough of them.
Yeah, then it's still not data. Then it's a bunch of anecdotes.
All right. Well, all right. But if I put it in a computer, I think that makes it data.
Then it's anecdotes with code.
Yeah. Well, but all right. We'll see. We'll see about that. I'll put it all in the computer. I'll show you that it's data. Oh, look at this. The picture that says, the picture that accompanies the, now that I see the full picture from this diary, there's a Trump Pence sign. And of course, next to it, this one was a little weird. Jesus 2020. Which I guess Herman Cain could be on his ticket. It's possible.
Here's a late breaking story from Medium Buying, who tracks, it's a Twitter account that tracks who's buying what for where.
No.
The Trump campaign is going back up on TV in multiple states. Start date tomorrow, September 1st.
Okay.
Florida,
Send that
North Carolina,
Florida,
Minnesota, and Wisconsin.
He hasn't campaigned enough in Wisconsin or something.
But not Michigan and not Pennsylvania.
Maybe they're next. Who knows?
Maybe. But that's kind of interesting.
Late in the game and ballots are being mailed. Okay. Well, I guess there's the Death Star. It finally showed up. I guess. I don't know. We'll see. It was interesting to see what the ad actually, what the time carries for them.
Right. Now, the former chief scientist for the FDA is named Luciana Borio, MD. Oh. And he tweeted yesterday, it would be, Luciana, he, it would be a huge mistake to issue an EUA before completion of the clinical trials. U.S. FDA guidance is clear. If Steve FDA prematurely issues emergency utilization for COVID vaccines, it will spectacularly backfire.
Oh, dear.
She says.
All right. We send that along so we can share that with everybody. And
I will. And she knows what she speaks of because she used to run the place. Okay.
So she knows the layout of the place and figures out. All right. Well, that makes sense. So EUA is emergency usage authorization.
You know, it's basically saying let's bypass some of the waiting through channels and let's just get it out there.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a good idea when you're trying to increase trust from the public in a vaccine that people are thinking is politically motivated, according to the stat poll that I told you about.
Okay.
So again, I don't see this as an October surprise that's going to help them. If anything, it's going to be one of those in-kind donations to the Biden campaign.
Yeah, all right. I guess so. But, yeah, it was worrying a lot of people, the vaccine thing. I have seen a lot of people that are anecdotes, not data, but tweeting about they'll be reluctant now, whereas normally you'd think people would be anxious to get a hold of it and even be interested in participating in trials willingly. Now everybody, thinking like, well, who knows what's in this? I mean, the guy was saying we should inject ourselves with bleach. What's in this? I don't know. Can you trust this at all? He's promoted. I mean, imagine they come up with an actual genuine vaccine and Trump is out there promoting it and telling everybody to take it and say, well, the choices so far have been hydroxychloroquine, maybe bleach, possibly light bulbs, who knows where in your body. And now, this thing, which also is conveniently timed to, make him look like he's actually active in combating the virus just before Election Day. I might take a wait and see attitude. Wait for the second or third update before you download this.
Right. Well, that's it for my
Okay.
segment for today. We should do the in memoriam properly. For Chadwick Boseman, for example. I watched 42. If you haven't seen that movie, it's just wonderful. Everybody's seen Black Panther, but not everybody's seen 42 about Jackie Robinson. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of other movies of his that are absolutely on the list. But Twitter told me that Jackie Robinson was his best role. I looked at it and said, wow, it really was fantastic.
I will have to see that one. I don't think
John Thompson from Georgetown, the coach.
Yes.
Patrick Ewing's coach from Georgetown. Died at age 78, says the Washington Post. And so just want to acknowledge the passing of those two people that you know.
Why, thank you.
And all those people from coronavirus that you didn't know.
Yes.
So with that, I'm done, and
Okay.
I'll be back on Wednesday, and we'll see what's going on. Should be some polling between then and now.
Well, there are people whose livelihoods revolve around that. So I assume so.
Yep.
You can't stop them polling when they're being paid to do it. That's something you said. No, that was a different thing about being paid. Okay. Very good. All right. Well, that's enough for Greg. Greg's like, that's it. I'm out of here. That was some. Okay. Well, at any rate, we'll catch up with some other things here. Speaking of people who may or may not have died of coronavirus, I will point this out. All the exciting stuff probably still somewhere in my Twitter feed from the weekend, somewhere along the line. Let's see, this probably would have been Saturday morning or so that I saw this. So I just giving myself notes about how far back to scroll. I saw somebody, I guess we'd have to say speculation or a conclusion that had been drawn, not without evidence, but it was shaky given what was being shared and who was sharing it. But not the person who tweeted this thing, but that the tweet was passing on that Laura Ingraham, who is terrible and unreliable in all ways, had said something. And it was, I guess she had indicated on her show. Here it is. I think I found it. I guess the first person to spot it that I saw was Shawnee, who tweets as Sean Robb 72, SHAWNROBB 72. Just your regular kind of American person, pissed off Wisconsin healthcare worker, had spotted this, and I guess finally provided or another Twitter personage, I guess, with whom she's in contact, sat through the show to go back and grab the clip. But Shawnee here says that Laura Ingraham just let it slip and said that Trump lost his brother to COVID, which was kind of an interesting thing to let slip. And it occurred to me that, she may not know at all what she's talking about, but why would she say such a thing if it weren't true? Is my first thought. Then my second thought was, She says all sorts of things that aren't true. But I said, what's the political advantage of saying that he died of COVID if he was trying politically to cover up that he had died of COVID? And I suppose it could be she's just sort of wildcatting it and saying, well, maybe my viewership will think more sympathetically of the president if it looks like he's sharing in the national pain. So it could be something like that. I don't know. Let's see if we can't. It's a short clip, I think. And if I can pull it up before our music begins, then you can hear it. We'll see what kind of audio quality we're talking about here. Let's see if we can't run it.
But I loved it when he talked about his brother. And he had just buried his brother, had lost his brother, his friends from COVID. There was a poignancy in Donald Trump last night that I think especially a lot of women, they want to see that emotional.
All right, so that's what we're talking about here. Now we're a little bit behind on the music, but let's, whoops. Now we're going to be even more behind unless we get this thing rolling. Okay, we'll have to cut out a little bit early and a little bit awkwardly, but I think we can manage to reverse engineer that. So you see what I'm talking about? It's, recording, I'm sure, somebody holding the phone up to their TV, so not the best audio quality, but I guess they're reviewing his Night 4 speech, and it's a little unclear whether she knows anything at all about what she's talking about, but I thought it was interesting to share. Keep it in the back of your mind. We'll be right back. Oh, well, look at that. Even worse. On top of all of this, I guess I'll fade this music down because I was watching the clock rather than waiting for the actual alarm to go off. And, the top of the hour break is the weird one that, because it's only 1 minute long, comes a little bit later. And I'm used to seeing the clock turning over to 57 and then saying, because at 9:27 and 9 and then 10:27, these things, my alarms go off. But the top of the hour break is a minute later. Okay, so now, finally, at this point, we are ready to go. And, now we got the music turned way up. All the engineering falling apart all of a sudden. And it was Laura Ingraham that did it. I heard her horrible voice and lost control of everything. Okay, on our way out. We'll get this one right eventually. We'll be right back. Okay, finally back. Okay, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm trying to recover from the major engineering oversight here that has now screwed things up to the extent that I'll have difficulty finding my music for my 2-minute break coming at 10:27 now. Everything has fallen apart here. And, it's one of the reasons that you need a production assistant on hand in studio in order to get things right and keep them right. And, we haven't done that. And so, okay, just a few minutes here while I search around for the file that I'm going to need in another half an hour from now in order to get things right. Okay, let's see. There it is. We'll have to bring up the soundboard. Bear with me for just a moment. And plug it in and rename it later. Okay, so for now, I think we'll be able to take our 2-minute break at 10:27 and 30 seconds when I start playing these things next time and get it right. Okay, boy. All stemming from wanting to sneak in a Laura Ingraham clip, which is probably the worst idea I've ever had. Okay, so just so you know who screwed me up. We definitely blame her. All right, let's see. So I'll also have to pocket those things in order for you to be able to experience them for yourself later on. So fun. Okay. Jumping back to Pocket, why not to some of the bigger stories that although I guess we'll now have to leave the New York Times story about whether or not all of the financial ties between Trump and Russia were in fact tracked down, or whether or not Rosenstein in fact misdirected enough people so that nobody covered it, and see how that squares with the tweet shared earlier by Greg, and also Karen chimed in with this one as well, saying hard to unravel this, and we'll have to wait for the book as Andrew Weissman says, all right, well, there's something wrong. Although very often, I think it's the case with almost every major story. There's some aspect of it that some player in a confusing story, a purposefully confusing story, not that they wrote the story in a purposefully confusing way, but it's fairly clear that some of the actors involved in the situation were looking to obfuscate both their own role and misdirect what did and didn't get investigated. It doesn't surprise me that Andrew Weissman would come away with a different impression of how things went, whether he's right or not. But yeah, okay. So once again, I'll go back and we'll let this lie for now, I guess, until we see how the Times approaches this piece and whether they simply stand by their story. And I guess maybe the thing to do, maybe during one of the breaks, we could check in and see. Marcy Wheeler probably having a field day with this one. I would think she would be inclined to go with Weissman's assessment of things, generally speaking, just because I think she has, to this point, found his information to be more thorough than you're likely to find, from a generalist writing, even making their best efforts at writing clearly for the New York Times. So anyway, we'll see how that one unravels. But other stories that probably require some time. This one, a bit of a throwback, and I think we'll take a look at it. Jonathan Swan from Axios, who had just done that remarkable interview with Donald Trump some weeks ago, writing this one here. Leaked McGahn memo reveals alarms about Kushner's security clearance. Remember back when people cared about the possibility of Jared Kushner not deserving to get and not being safe to grant him a top secret national security clearance, but Trump just saying go ahead and do it anyway because what do I care about anything? Now we have a memo that seems to lay things out from White House counsel Don McGahn back in February of 2018. Two-page memo sent to then Chief of Staff John Kelly. Both of those two guys now gone, so who cares, right? Kushner's going to get what he wants, and maybe they're gone because of it. Arguing that Jared Kushner's security clearance needed to be downgraded, the New York Times' Michael Schmidt reports in his forthcoming book, Donald Trump versus the United States. Schmidt, of course, is the Times reporter who also produced over the weekend the very story we were just discussing, and aspects of which Andrew Weissman disputes. And that's the book Karen's talking about, since we now have to wait for, saying we now have to wait for that. Again, another data point, I guess, or as Greg might have it, anecdote, in the for the theory in which we surmise that some of the best and most interesting pieces of the reporting being done at major newspapers, including the Washington Post and New York Times, is too scary for the paper editors to allow into print for some reason. But the authors or the reporters are encouraged to print them in their tell-all books, which they no longer have to leave the employ of the newspapers to write. But that seems to be kind of an emerging MO. Is the hottest stuff? I don't know. I guess maybe it's equal parts wanting to save the best stuff for your book so you can cash in and get a big payday, which people like big paydays. I don't know if I can blame them for that exactly. But on the other hand, there's also the possibility that the papers are just too cautious, and maybe with good reason. They're going to end up getting sued by a lot of people will do it, but Trump is particularly litigious. Even when he knows he doesn't have a leg to stand on, he likes to do this sort of thing. So, again, not without foundation. And I guess before we get too mad at the newspaper people and blame it all on them, there is this other side to it, right? Just to flip the coin for a second here. 'cause why not? How irritated were you by the prospect of a writer? And we're not saying necessarily that Michael Schmidt is doing this, but he's one of many who seem to save as we said, the juiciest details for the book, maybe because they were looking for the big payday. But again, people like big paydays, right? I don't know what they pay him at the New York Times. Their budget's bigger than most, and he's been a top line reporter for them for a long time. So I imagine he's reasonably well compensated, and maybe better compensated than you or I for whatever it is that we're doing. Even if we get it right all the time, and Andrew Weissman never argues with us. But anyway, I guess I just wanted to put out there that the idea that they might be looking to profit fairly significantly off of the work they were doing is not a bad thing all by itself. And I just wanted to kind of prop it up next to the idea of people saying, we shouldn't have to pay this much, or don't subscribe to this one or that one. I understand the arguments, of course, about not subscribing to certain papers, and I understand even the arguments where people say the New York Times ought not to be one of the ones that receive your funding because they're terrible. It's just a weird, maybe all that's going on is a weird funding model. I guess some opponents would say, well, don't buy the books of the New York Times reporters either. But it's just sort of one of those weird economic dynamics, right? People just generally speaking don't like paying for the news because it's quote unquote free on the internet. And, we are of course always reminded, and I don't think anybody among the audience has ever been fooled about the idea of news just being free. We realize we have to pay for it. It's just sort of maybe a weird economic byproduct of that tension between the price ought to be as low as possible, but we also need to pay the best people we can find to dig the hardest and find the stories that we need. But if we can't manage it under the umbrella of the New York Times daily paper, where we have to keep margins tight, I guess that's what explains the idea of working simultaneously on breaking important news, but only part of it in the newspaper, plus, of course, the caution about being sued all the time by Trump and others, along with, we can't let you report it here, but you can keep it to yourself, and and we can't pay you the big bucks that you think you deserve for breaking such important stories, but you can recoup that by publishing with our assent outside of the paper. I don't know. There seems like a lot of moving parts to this. All right. So we had departed, though, from reading Jonathan Swann's relatively brief write-up over at Axios. You know how they like to do things with bullet points. Again, this is about the White House counsel Don McGahn sending a 2-page memo back in February of 2018, basically saying Kushner shouldn't have a security clearance, at least not at the level that he's got. Why is this news? Well, they just put it bluntly in the driving the news paragraph here, so labeled. Schmidt reports directly from the confidential McGahn memo for the first time, describing how Kelly had serious concerns about granting Kushner a top-secret clearance in response to a briefing he had received related to the routine FBI investigation into Kushner's background. Then the bullet points come. The information you were briefed on 1 week ago and subsequently relayed to me raises serious additional concerns about whether this individual, Kushner, ought to retain a top security clearance until such issues can be investigated and resolved, McGahn wrote in the memo to Kelly. Next bullet point. The details of the highly sensitive intelligence that raised alarms with Kelly are not revealed in the McGahn memo or in Schmidt's book. McGahn wrote that he had been unable to receive the briefing or access this highly compartmented information directly about Kushner, Schmidt reports. Interim secret, that's the clearance that he held and called interim secret, I guess, is the highest clearance that I can concur until further information is received. Oh, I guess he had the top secret, but he wanted to bump him down to interim secret. That's McGahn's conclusion. That went nowhere. because Trump saw a family member under threat and said, no, we're not having that. Between the lines, it is labeled here, this section in Axios, by reducing Kushner's clearance from top secret to secret, McGahn and Kelly had restricted Kushner's access to the PDB, the closely held rundown provided by the intelligence community 6 days a week for the president and his top aides and other highly sensitive intelligence that exposed sources and methods. McGahn did note that there was a possibility that when the background check was complete, it could be resolved in Kushner's favor, or there could be a recommendation that he not receive a clearance, Schmidt writes. Remember, the actual thing driving all of this is Kushner couldn't manage to fully nail down his actual background check that was necessary for this, because he kept having to amend it. They kept saying, the basic question of, have you been having contacts with any foreign operatives? List them here, foreign officials. Tell us who you're in contact with so we know what to watch and think about. And he kept saying, nobody. All right, Russians. All right, 1 Russian. All right, 2 Russians. Okay, 3. Okay, well, now they think about it, 4. All right, 50. Plus, whoever else. Ukrainians, Bulgarians, Israelis. He kept forgetting over and over hundreds and hundreds of contacts that he'd had. And they kept pushing him on it. Come on, I think we all know that you talked to. Oh, yeah, all right, so him too. Yeah, but we also know that you talked to this other one. Why didn't you? The prompting we were giving you the first time was supposed to get you to spill it. We know who you're talking to. Everybody knows who you're talking to. So come on, write it down. He could never get it right. He revised it like 5, 6 times. McGahn conceded in the memo that Trump could, if he chose, simply disregard any security concerns and circumvent any standard procedures and grant Kushner the security clearance himself. And ta-da, that's finally what he did. The bottom line, President Trump ultimately intervened to ensure Kushner got his top secret security clearance. Schmidt reviewed more than 1,000 pages of federal government documents that have not been previously reported on. These include sensitive materials from Mueller's office, former White House Chief of Staff John Kelly's office, the White House counsel's office, the president's legal team, and the FBI. No response to requests for comment by any of the people named in the article. So, reconfirming the old reporting that we had before, that Kushner was simply handed his security clearance and never deserved it, but Donald Trump didn't give a crap one way or the other, and good. Glad we have that out of the way. Plus, of course, the interesting dynamics of writing a book while you're working for the newspaper. All right, other issues of some interest. Let's say we jump over here. One of the smaller controversies revived over the weekend. President Trump guilty of voter fraud. How so? Well, his re-registration as a Floridian, and of course he was registered to vote most of his during his campaign and most of his term in New York. Trump Tower was pretty much what everybody knew to be his residence, but he decided to switch his residence to Florida so that he could vote there. Whatever. Okay, I guess every vote counts down in Florida, and he thought he would do things. Every vote's supposed to count everywhere, but you know how it is in New York. All right. So, number of problems with that, including the fact that he doesn't really live there. And right now, of course, he lives in Washington, D.C., and it would be awfully difficult, I think, under Florida law, to claim a domicile in Florida when everybody knows pretty much where he is at all times, and it's not Florida. He's there occasionally. He goes there a lot. He likes to visit. He owns Mar-a-Lago. That is all true. But making it his residence is fraught with peril, and we'll illustrate how that is with these articles. Let's see. Shall we start with this one? Or is this the... this is the one that goes back to June of 2020, but the author refers back to a lot of other pieces in putting these claims together. So let's say there's a May one and a pardon me, and so May and what did we say, June? All right, I'm gonna have to get all these things. One from May, one from June, and then let's see, what is this one? This is all the reporting of, and I guess I saw this discussed on Twitter, and I grabbed all the source material for the discussion rather than the discussion itself, but all the reporting of Manuel Roig Franzia, who has been watching this particular issue of Trump and his domicile. So let's take a look at this one here. President Trump tried to register to vote in Florida using an out-of-state address. That's an interesting attempt at anything. So as you know, we're already in trouble in terms of his slamming voting by mail as somehow being rife with fraud, despite the fact that he votes by mail all the time. And I guess this really fills in the gaps. What sorts of fraud might people be perpetrating in their voting by mail? Well, one of them could be, people who don't actually live in a certain state claiming to be entitled to vote there because they think the contest in that state will be a lot closer than the state where they currently maintain a domicile. So they want to pretend to be Floridian. On what basis can I pretend to be Floridian? I own lots of property in Florida. And most people assume that wherever you own property, a home anyway, you could just claim that as your primary residence and register to vote there. And for a lot of people, that's actually true. They spend enough time there that they can make it work. But there's rules about these things, and Trump isn't meeting the requirements of any of them. But he doesn't care because, one, he thinks, why don't you just ism is a valid approach to everything. And two, he figures everybody else will think so too. So in the June 12th piece by Manuel Roig Franzia, President Trump tried to register to vote in Florida using an out-of-state address. We learned this. He originally tried to register to vote in Florida while claiming that his legal residence was in another part of the country, Washington, D.C., which is where we all know that he actually lives now in the White House. This according to Florida elections records, which is remarkable because what he was doing was filling out paperwork. This is just, I guess this is also a your president is so dumb, how dumb is he sort of story. I want to register to vote in Florida. All right, well, here's the form. Fill it out. Where do you currently live? And the idea here, for those of you who might be thinking of becoming president and cheating, is you're supposed to say in Florida. And that's the sort of thing that will convince Florida voter registration officials that, okay, good, we will register you to vote in Florida. Now, if you say, I live in Oklahoma, but I would rather vote in Florida, they say, no, that's not going to work. And here, the president, remember, this is the one who was able to tell the difference between a lion and an elephant and could supposedly draw a clock face properly and remember such complicated combinations as person, woman, man, camera, TV. Now, where would you like to register to vote, sir? Florida. And where do you live? Washington, D.C. See, failure right off the bat in terms of this little cognition test here. The September 2019 registration application listed Trump's legal residence as 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest, which is, of course, the location of the White House. That created a only potential problem for Trump. Florida law requires voters to be legal residents of the state. And really, I think just about almost everybody probably requires that. A month later, Trump resubmitted his application, like Jared Kushner, to use a Florida address. And in March, he voted by mail in Florida's Republican primary, which means, presumably, that Florida elections officials, by the time March rolled around, thought, okay, he is a legal resident of Florida. There's a problem, of course, though. The revisions complicate Trump's own record as a voter at a time when the president has made unsubstantiated claims of widespread fraud in mail-in balloting. Trump's original voter registration application, which was obtained by the Washington Post via a public records request, was filed during a time when the president was making a highly publicized move to change his permanent residence from his Manhattan penthouse to Mar-a-Lago, his private club in Palm Beach, Florida. The voter application is dated September 27, 2019. the same day that Trump made the domicile change. On one of his forms that day, he was telling Florida officials that his legal residence was Washington, D.C., and on another, he was saying he was a bona fide resident of Palm Beach. And you can see, I guess, how he makes the mistake. It's not beyond the pale for people to say, all right, well, I'm living temporarily in Washington, D.C. by virtue of my office. And you all know what my office is, right? I'm allegedly president of the United States. I want to change my legal domicile to something from New York, where you all know I own a penthouse apartment, to Florida, where you all know I own the Mar-a-Lago Club, which is, it's a club, but I maintain a residence there, even though whatever. And that's kind of weird. You live at a club, but okay. That becomes a problem later on in story number 2 or number 3 here. But for the time being, I can't say I live in Mar-a-Lago when you all know I live at the White House, right? So he gets confused and says, well, my legal residence, legally speaking, I'm right here. Now, that's actual. Right? I'm right here in Washington, D.C. But my real residence, I want to be Florida. But, yeah, you're going to have to – the terminology is wrong. You want to say that your legal residence is in Florida and you're also a Florida resident. But at the moment, I'm in Washington, D.C. due to work, and that's why I'm going to request an absentee ballot. But he misunderstands the whole thing. While it's probably a common source of confusion, it should not be one to anyone mentally competent to handle the presidency of the United States. And he maybe, could get some help filling the goddamn thing out. Like, can I find a lawyer or somebody who knows what they're talking about? Somebody fill this out for me. Bring it to me to be signed. I will sign it myself with a Sharpie, no doubt. But good delegation on that one by Donald Trump. So, on Florida registration, of course, the applicants are warned on registration forms that they may be subject to fines and even prison time if they don't provide truthful information. Seeing that, you might get some help. On Thursday, that's, back in June, one particular Thursday, an elections fraud complaint was filed with the Florida Department of State against Trump by Jim Watson, the semi-retired truck driver from Boynton Beach, Florida, who apparently understood the situation better than the President of the United States. In the complaint, Watson asserts that Trump is prohibited from using Mar-a-Lago as his legal residence because it's a private club, and he understands the full totality of the problem here. Not just that he's living in Washington, D.C. That's not actually the problem, although you shouldn't say it that way on the form. But there's another. You can't possibly really live here. This is a Wendy's. You don't live here, even if you eat here a lot. This is he's not just saying, well, because it's a club, you can't possibly live there. Because, Trump fans and others will point out, like I said, he does maintain a, whatever you call it there, a bungalow, whatever it is. It's a residence that's clearly for his use and no one else's, and he's reserved that. And maybe no one else has that ability at Mar-a-Lago, but he does. He owns the place. Why can't it be his legal residence? Well, as it turns out, this is in a recorded agreement, a covenant running with the land to the benefit of all Florida and Palm Beach County residents, the complaint states. What's he talking about? Basically, long story short here, when Trump bought the property, and it was at the time a private residence. It was Marjorie Merriweather Post, right, who owned the place and was in, some distress. And he bought it off of her, and he made a big deal about getting fire sale pricing for it. But when he wanted to convert it into a club, and by the way, why did he want to convert it into a club? He bought the place when he was rumored to be the big businessman bazillionaire. And then it turned out very shortly afterwards, he's not really got half of the money that he claims to have. He's actually cash poor and in a tremendous amount of debt, at which point he said, he decided, you know what? This thing that I bought as the showiest, dumbest looking private residence, the most expensive one in America, even though I said I paid a lot less for it, whatever, ignore all of that. I now want to turn it into a money-making club because reasons. I just like people. I want them around, hanging around at my house all the time. And the answer is, of course, he couldn't really afford to be doing what he was doing, living there. Anyway, so at any rate, he asked for permission, essentially, to rezone and everything so that he could open it up as a beach club. And Palm Beach didn't stand in the way of that, but they said, all right, one of the requirements, though, is it can't be both. You can't make it your residence. You can't claim to be living at Mar-a-Lago if you want it to be a club. And he signed it. A-OK. No problem. I agree to that. Until now. All of a sudden. Weird. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Okay. So I think we've gotten to the bottom of the very basic facts, anyway, about the situation. But there's more detail to come in this article, as well as the others here, and I thought we might just dig a little bit further into it. The complaint that was filed by our friend, the semi-retired truck driver, was accompanied by a letter, pardon me, that asked that the complaint be forwarded to the state attorney in Palm Beach County. The complaint raises the stakes in an ongoing battle over Trump's residency, shifting it squarely into the realm of Florida authorities, who will be faced with handling the politically charged matter. And I guess we're only now getting around to finding out how far backwards will they bend to make allowances for Trump here. I mean, essentially, anybody else in this situation right now gets charged with voter fraud. But the embarrassment that it would cause the president to be charged that way and the interest that Florida officials have in staying out of his crosshairs tells us that they probably just won't ever come around to leveling these charges. And so there's another additional twist that's reported on here. Let's add this. Noting that Trump now uses Mar-a-Lago as his legal residence for his voter registration, the complaint says that the Mar-a-Lago Club is not a property where anyone can legally reside. A letter accompanying the complaint asks that it be forwarded to the state attorney. The complaint raises the stakes, as we mentioned. And Watson, that's our complainant here, right? Is that just I have to flip back a couple paragraphs to make sure that we have that right. Where did we find that out? All right, well, I think that's certainly the way it appears to play out. Why I can't find that part about his being a semi-retired truck driver. There it is, Jim Watson. Okay, good, finally. Watson is represented by Reginald Stambaugh, an attorney for a Mar-a-Lago neighbor who has been engaged in a lengthy dispute with Trump over the president's plans to build a dock at the club. That's the new wrinkle. So remember, of course, Palm Beach is full of litigious rich people who are Gimitarian rich people who want their way on everything and are used to getting it. And Trump fits in perfectly with them, but that doesn't mean they all get along. They're all constantly suing one another over land use issues. It's like basically sort of like a homeowners association gone berserk. Trump wants to use this private property, this gaudy, ridiculous private property as a club. And I think to most people you would say, well, what's the problem with that? And the answer is everybody, all the neighbors also have gaudy, ridiculous properties, and they want them, they think it will diminish the property value if the hoi polloi can just pay $200,000 a year. I mean, it takes a lot to be able to pay $200,000 a year to be a member of this club, right? But if they're so rich, let them buy their own damn gaudy property in Palm Beach, and then they can join the homeowners association, and we can all bother each other and sue each other over the color paint that we choose for our outbuildings and whether or not we should be able to mount the dish antenna over here or not, and all these fun things. And you remember from earlier days in the show, there was always controversy. Trump wanted to put a bigger flag on the flagpole than the city would allow. Like I said, homeowners association gone crazy. Well, he wanted to put a dock there. Why? Because his beautiful boaters deserve to be able to, motor up and fly Trump flags. Although this is, I think, from even earlier, possibly before his presidency. But, he wanted to make all sorts of amenities available at the club so that he could brag about having them. If he could, he would knock down his neighbors' houses and build a golf course right there. Well, anyway, apparently at some point he wants to add a dock to the property. In an interview, Stambaugh, the attorney for one of the Mar-a-Lago neighbors, right, who's suing about this, asserted that Florida law requires an investigation of any properly filed elections fraud complaint. At least one elections fraud complaint is being prepared, according to documents reviewed by the Post. Watson declined to comment on his complaint. The fact is, President Trump is a legal resident of Florida, says his people, who legally votes in the state. Except that's not the fact. It's in dispute. Liberal Democrats having an issue with where the president lives has absolutely nothing to do with the president's right to vote in his home state, which it isn't. This is a ridiculous, which it isn't, and partisan, which it is, zoning complaint. That's it. Justin Clark, a senior political advisor and senior counsel for Trump's reelection campaign, said in an email a week after the publication of this article, which again was back in June, there has been at least one recent instance in Florida in which a public official faced legal consequences for registering to vote at an address that was not her legal residence. Last year, the city manager of Deltona, Florida, entered into an agreement with the local state's attorney's office to pay more than $5,000 in fees and reimbursements for the state's investigation to avoid being prosecuted on criminal charges in a voter registration case. She had registered to vote using the address of Deltona's City Hall, which is also not a home address you can have, but she wanted to use that rather than her home address, and had cast a ballot in an election using that registration. I don't know if it's described in this one, but in another of the articles that I had set aside, she didn't want to reveal her home address. I guess concerns about her own privacy, but that's just one of the flip sides of being a public figure. That comes with the territory, I guess. But not an unreasonable wish, but not able to be accommodated under law. In Palm Beach, where Trump is registered to vote, there was a high-profile arrest in 1993 of a popular restaurateur who was charged with voter fraud and briefly jailed because he registered to vote in Palm Beach but lived in the neighboring city of West Palm Beach. A felony charge in the case was eventually dropped. Just by way of background on this thing, a month passed before Trump filed the second voter registration application, this time listing 1100 South Ocean Boulevard, Palm Beach, that is the address of Mar-a-Lago, as his legal residence instead of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. There also was another difference. Trump's original voter registration directed elections officials to send his registration materials to Mar-a-Lago in care of another person. Who was it? Sean McCabe, a vice president and general manager of Trump Florida Properties in the neighboring city of West Palm Beach. McCain's first name, Shawn, S-H-A-W-N, is misspelled on the registration as S-E-A-N, which, again, remember, the Trump campaign will be fighting, and is now currently fighting tooth and nail to invalidate registrations, and later will fight tooth and nail to throw out ballots because of technicalities like this. So there's not much room for error, except, there's no such thing as not much room for error in a Trump operation, because they just blow through it all and make errors all over the place. It's unclear precisely what happened during the 31 days between Trump's two applications. It's possible that Florida elections officials flagged the D.C. address on the application and may have requested a change or clarification. Palm Beach County Supervisor of Elections Wendy Sartori Link and the state's Division of Elections did not respond to written questions. Trump Organization representatives didn't respond to written questions, and McCabe couldn't be reached for comment. Trump has used his change of residency as a political tool, saying at the time of his announcement that he had been treated badly in New York. Beyond that, he hasn't explained his reasons. Voting outside of D.C. While serving as president is not uncommon. Obama did the same thing in casting his vote from Chicago or as a Chicago voter. George W. Bush voted by mail in Texas, of course. Trump, however, has sent confusing signals about his official state of residence beyond the recent change on his Florida voter registration forms. On Monday, again back in June, he declared, "I live in Manhattan," during a call with the nation's governors about the response to unrest related to protests the Black Lives Matter protests, of course, that were then ongoing still in New York. But basically to claim bona fides as a resident of Manhattan so he can properly worry about the fate of America's great cities, you see. But then when he needs to vote, he wants to pretend he lives in Florida. Anyway, afterward, prominent Democratic lawyer Mark Elias tweeted, "Sounds like New York may have a good claim for taxes," another of the reasons he may have moved his domicile, "and Florida may have a good claim for voter fraud." And he's right about both. Questions about the legality of Trump's change of domicile surfaced in the past few weeks during an otherwise mundane fight he's been waging since 2018 to persuade Palm Beach to let him build a dock at Mar-a-Lago. Trump initially made the request, which is being considered by Palm Beach City Council, saying it was needed to enhance security to protect him. He needed, RoboCop on a boat, I guess, out in the water by Mar-a-Lago. He later changed the request, I guess realizing that was ridiculous, saying Mar-a-Lago is his, quote, personal residence, and that the dock would be for private family use only, which I would never believe. It might be the sort of thing that he thought he could sneak in under a loophole. Well, I don't want, essentially commercial use of this dock to have Secret Service and Coast Guard and, all sorts of traffic in and out to personally protect you. But they probably read somewhere, one of the lawyers read, for personal use, you can have a dock. Oh, okay. Well, in that case, the dock is for personal use. And he would probably agree to that. And, there's some reason to believe that he might make personal use of it, but then he would immediately just turn it over to anyone who wanted to use it with Secret Service to protect him or members at Mar-a-Lago or what have you. But the dock would be built and there would be no undoing it. So anyway, whatever it takes to get the thing built, he says it's for private family use only. According to Mar-a-Lago's website, by the way, he maintains, quote, private quarters at the club. Trump calls Mar-a-Lago his winter White House and has traveled there more than 24 times during his presidency, staying there well over 100 days, according to a Washington Post tally. Opponents of the dock unearthed an agreement with the city that Trump signed in the early 1990s, converting Mar-a-Lago's use from a single-family residence to a private club. At the time, his attorney told the council that he would not live at the club. Now, they were approving his building of the Mar-a-Lago Club based on this promise that he would not live there. And now he just says, well, I think I want to live there. At the time, his attorney had said that he wouldn't, but that he would have use of the facilities like any other member. The agreement also bans members from staying at the club, any member, for more than 21 days a year, spread over 3 non-consecutive visits. It's one or the other. It's a club or it's your home. Stambaugh, the Mar-a-Lago neighbor's attorney, told the Post in an interview last month, that'd be May, you can't have it both ways. Trump withdrew the dock request in early May, 3 days after the Post reported on the existence of the use agreement and the potential legal problems it posed. His attorney told the council that he would revisit the request at a future date. Glenn Zeitz, a Philadelphia area attorney who has a home in Palm Beach, has been informally advising the doc opponents, and he said that the withdrawal has no bearing on the legal issues raised by Trump's domicile issue. Zeitz said that Trump's decision to use Mar-a-Lago as his domicile may represent a substantial and serious potential legal impediment to Trump registering to vote in Florida, where he's already cast a ballot, and so we have a fraud problem, right? The revelation about Trump using an out-of-state address for his first voter application only adds more questions, he said. It's just beyond the pale, Zeitz said, that something is being done like this. Except, we've spent a lot of time on it, but it is one of the lesser outrages. But of course, in all the time that he's spent screaming about voter fraud, it's just a willful, thing. He knows that there's an inherent contradiction there. He just doesn't care. And he may be enjoying bothering people with it. That, too, another of the interesting revelations from over the weekend. Let's see. This one, too, came out of, I think out of New York Times reporting. Let's see if I can't find that one. I thought that was kind of interesting, too. And yet it's not immediately apparent in Pocket. But let's see if I can find it. I know that one came up over the weekend in Twitter as well. Somebody circulating the reporting, and maybe I never traced it back to its original source, but I think it was New York Times. But pointing out that for all the hand-wringing about the impropriety of Trump using the White House grounds and various Washington, D.C. locales for the Republican National Convention, among other things that he improperly used to indicate the powers of the incumbency, which is what's supposed to be prohibited in the use of government resources for campaign purposes. It was also revealed at some point that sources were saying that Trump particularly enjoyed the fact that blurring these lines angered other people. Here we are. Isaac Chotiner reporting this one, a New Yorker staff, as he says, and senior editor at the New Republic. Is that right? And he grabbed this out of the New York Times saying, "Nice job, everyone who helped us get here." The clip he's grabbed, and I guess we can find the actual article too, if we click all the way through. But the clip he's grabbed, Mr. Trump's aides said he enjoyed the frustration and anger that he caused by holding a political event on the South Lawn of the White House, shattering conventional norms and raising questions about ethics law violations. He relished the fact that no one could do anything to stop him, said the aides, who spoke anonymously to discuss internal conversations. That very interesting paragraph is apparently, I guess, others have said it's a buried lead in a in a story entitled, which is baffling given what's being covered here. Rival themes emerge as race enters final weeks. COVID versus law and order. Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, we could probably spend some time discussing the weirdness of that title and approach to things, but to no one's surprise, the New York Times doing its best to obfuscate what it's actually reporting on in their headlines for whatever reason. Okay. So I thought that was of some interest too. Just, I think that's all we'll take from this article at the moment, but, keep in mind, because it's interesting and revealing to say the least. I think we all suspected that that was the case. Steve Vladek made a good point about this one in tweeting, Chotiner's tweet around saying he sure learned his lesson. Hey, Senator Collins. Yeah. Doesn't sound like he actually has. Okay. Well, that's the joke. Let's see. Other items that might be wise to share at this point. How about a Media Matters roundup of the many QAnon conspiracy believing candidates for Congress still standing at this point. I don't know whether they stand the same chance at winning as Marjorie Greene does down in Florida, or Georgia rather. But the fact is they're on the ballot, and you ought to know about it and get some idea of exactly how widespread this is among people who make it to levels of the Republican Party that would include getting a nomination for a seat in the federal legislature. Now, not all of them make it, and in some cases you are talking about a sacrificial lamb in a heavily Democratic district, so it really doesn't matter as much as a practical issue. But just to give you an idea of how widespread the phenomenon is, here are the QAnon supporters running for Congress in 2020. The QAnon conspiracy theory, the subheader tells us, is rooted in the Chan message boards. Here are 78 current or former congressional candidates who embrace it. Former would be of somewhat less concern to us here, except that we would be talking about the 2018 election. So, the last two times out of the gate, the Republicans have fallen prey to this. Oh, and there are some updates here. The article has been repeatedly updated. More congressional candidates. It's been rearranged by alphabetical order and updated to note the status of the candidates following primary elections. Excellent. Multiple supporters of the QAnon conspiracy theory, the piece by Alex Kaplan reads, which got its start on far-right message boards. They're all running campaigns for Congress in 2020. The conspiracy theory, let's see how they explain it, which revolves around an anonymous account known as Q, started on the far-right message board site 4chan, later moving to fellow far-right message board site 8chan, which has since relaunched as 8kun. I don't know how they say it, but 8kun. Beyond the QAnon conspiracy theory, 8chan/8kun has been linked to multiple instances of white supremacist terrorism, including the 2019 massacre in El Paso. The Q account's claim, and the conspiracy theory's premise, is that President Donald Trump was working with then special counsel Robert Mueller, interestingly enough, to take down the president's perceived enemies, the deep state and pedophiles, in most cases one and the same. Multiple adherents to the conspiracy theory have been tied to acts of violence, including multiple murders and attempted kidnappings. Those are bad things. And an FBI field office released a memo in 2019, in May, that listed QAnon as a potential domestic terrorism threat. Currently, among these candidates who have endorsed or given credence to the conspiracy theory or promoted QAnon content, there are 20 candidates, 19 Republicans and 1 independent, who have already secured a spot on the ballot in November's general election by competing in primary elections or by fulfilling other requirements needed to get on the ballot. Of those 20 candidates, 5 are from California, 3 from Georgia, 2 each are from Illinois and Arizona, and there is 1 each from Colorado, Florida, no surprise there, Nevada, Hawaii, New Jersey, Oregon, Ohio, and Texas. 1 candidate in New York is running as a Republican write-in in November's general election. 1 candidate in Louisiana is running in the state's nonpartisan blanket primary in November. In total, 73 of the candidates are Republicans, 2 are Democrats, 1 is a Libertarian, and 2 are Independents. So let's get right to the list here. It says below the list is of candidates who have endorsed or given credence to the conspiracy theory or promoted QAnon content, divided into sections for 1, candidates who have secured a spot on the ballot or are running as write-ins, 2, candidates whose primaries are still upcoming, and 3, candidates who are no longer running or whose status is unknown. Perhaps, time will limit us. In any case, candidates who've made it to the November general election or are a write-in. First up, again, alphabetical order, Josh Barnett of Arizona, a Republican candidate running in Arizona's 7th congressional district. He won the Republican primary on August 4th by default, running unopposed, and thus will be on the ballot in November's general election. In July, in response to an NBC News report about Twitter's announcement that it would take action against the spread of QAnon on the platform, Barnett tweeted, "Weird to be so paranoid about something that is not real, right?" On both Facebook and Instagram, he has shared posts with QAnon hashtags. Despite those posts, Barnett claimed on August 15th he believes QAnon is nonsense and not even a real thing, and that one of his posts with QAnon hashtags was just retweeting the article. So not the strongest endorsement of QAnon there, but, it seems pretty clear that he knows what he's getting into, and his own content is equally egregious. So we won't let him escape all the way on that one. Let's run through these. In Nevada, Joyce Bentley, a Republican candidate running in the 1st Congressional District. She won the Republican primary, so she's on the ballot. Let's see. She has since deleted a tweet posted with a link to a YouTube video promoting QAnon from a QAnon account. In the tweet, Bentley wrote out the title of the video, Q, We Are the Plan. So not an offhand retweet. Lauren Boebert, B-O-E-B-R-T, is the Colorado candidate, Republican running in Colorado's 3rd Congressional District. She's won the primary, so she's on. She has appeared on the online show Steel Truth, hosted by QAnon supporter Ann Vandersteel, during which Vandersteel asked her if she knew about the Q movement. Boebert responded that she was very familiar with it and said that while she did not focus on it a lot, she hoped that QAnon is real because it only means America is getting stronger and better. Fun. So there's an awful lot on it. She also appeared on Patriot Soapbox, a major QAnon YouTube channel, and appears to have a YouTube account that subscribes to multiple QAnon channels. Despite all of that, Boebert has since claimed, I don't follow QAnon, and that QAnon is a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Okay. Well, that solves everything. Mike Cargile, I guess, Cargill, I don't know, C-A-R-G-I-L-E, from California, in California's 35th district. And he's managed, I guess, to get himself on the ballot. And in the interest of time and getting these names out here, we'll just skip the descriptions and let you read them offline, just in case you're worried someone near you might be a QAnon weirdo. Aaron Cruz in California's 36th district. Ron Curtis, Hawaii's 1st Congressional District, suspected of QAnon weirdness as well. Ron Curtis. Derek Grayson in Georgia, the Republican candidate running for the U.S. Senate in a special election in Georgia. I guess that would mean opposing Loeffler. But okay, well, let's see. Next up, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who we know quite a bit about by now, but she gets a listing as well. Allison Hayden, California's 15th district. K.W. Miller, the Florida candidate in Florida's 18th congressional district, independent there. Oh, yes, and quite a Twitter personage as well. I think well known as a complete wacko. Buzz Patterson, California's 7th district. Joe Ray Perkins in Oregon's 4th congressional district. Nika, 2 Ks, N-I-K-K-A, Nika Peterman, P-I-T-E-R-M-A-N, California 13. Billy Prempeh, if that's, I don't know how he's pronounced it, P-R-E-M-P-E-H, New Jersey 9. So that looks pretty good. Here's the at a Q rally, holding the Q signs up and saying, where we go, when we go all. No doubt about that one. Teresa Rayborn, Illinois 2nd. Angela Stanton King, Georgia's 5th district. Johnny Teague in Texas's 9th congressional district. Antoine Tucker is the Republican write-in in New York 14. Rob Weber in Ohio 9th district. Getting towards the end of the folks, I guess I made it onto the ballot. Philanese White, P-H-I-L-A-N-I-S-E, White, Republican candidate in Illinois' 1st congressional district. A couple more here before we have to duck out here. Daniel Wood, Arizona's 3rd congressional district. Shiva Ayadurai, I'm hoping as close, well, who cares really, if we get this guy right. Ayyadurai, it's a tough one. Massachusetts, Let's see. Yeah, as a Senate candidate, so not likely to get through there, but there he is. Ben Gibson, Louisiana 4th. Bob Lancia in Rhode Island's 2nd District. Tracy Lovorn with 2 V's, Lovvorn, Massachusetts 2nd. Matthew Morris in Delaware, that's an at-large seat. Lauren Witzke, also in Delaware, so they got an embarrassment of riches there. And then, of course, on to the next sections about candidates who are either no longer running or whose status is unknown. Take a look in case we called your district or your state and you're just not sure, or you just want to gawk at what your neighbors are doing. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll be talking with Joan McCarter, of course, and following up on some of the other major stories. Hopefully all the engineering will be right again tomorrow, if I can fix it, and that won't be a major distraction. And in the meantime, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, where I imagine they have all the engineering down pat. Coming up next, we'll bring you the stories from around the country and around the world without such painful
From
interruptions.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, remember, he takes his tour around the world, and what he's got on tap for you next. Let's see. Police forcibly rebuffed far-right extremists who stormed the German parliament, yikes, following a protest against the country's pandemic restrictions, and a French military officer now held on suspicion of spying for Russia's GRU.